Gates Brown was the greatest pinch hitter in the history of the American League, and he did much to write the history of Tiger Stadium. Gates, what did it mean to you to come to Detroit and play in a ballpark like Tiger Stadium?
Well, Joe, when I was, I would say, incarcerated, I read a lot of books about Tiger Stadium, Ty Cobb and Heinemann Nuish and Hank Greenberg and all of them, and I knew a lot about the stadium, although I never seen it, but I did a lot of reading after I signed to play for the Tigers, and it had a lot of memories, like Ty Cobb, even though he might not have been one of my favorites. I mean, he was a hell of a ball player, and you got to take your hat off to him. But it was just walking out on the field and just looking around at some of the seats and, the way the stadium was put together and nice and cozy in right field. God, I love that right field overhang, I just wish I could have played a little more, but it was a good place to hit in, and I'm also proud of I'm one of the few blacks that first started there. You had Dobie in '59, but he was on his way out. They said Ozzie Virgil was the first black, but he's a Latino now, and then you had Jake Woods and Billy Buten, Bubba Morton, and then, I came along in '63, me and Willie Smith, and, I like to say one of the first 5 or 6 blacks that played in Tiger Stadium, and I will always remember that because, as we both know, maybe the Tiger wasn't always the friendliest, but it was home to me. But the fans treated you well. Oh, very well. That's one thing I look back, and you had great players like Willie Horton and Norman Cash, and I mean, the fans would get on them sometime unmercifully. And I'd be struggling, and I never heard a boo or they just never got on me. I don't know whether they felt sorry for me or whatever, but sometime I watched them and heard them get on Willie, and I'm saying, how in the hell can he take all that, and Cash, because they really leaned on him sometime. But deep down in, they were good fans, and I will always take my hat off to them. I love them. God bless them, because even in my baddest time, they never really got on the gator. Well, you're a people person, I can tell you that, even from the press box, the way we viewed you. You're the only guy that I think played or was a part of the '68 champions and the '84 champions. First as a player, then as a coach. What does that mean to you? I take pride in that. For number one, they haven't had that many. Before '68, what was the last one? 1945? Right. All right, '68, and then I was playing, and then in '84 I was coaching. And I take pride in that. There's not too many ball players that can say that, especially on the Tigers. I think the only other one might have been Dick Trzaski. He was also coaching and playing in '68. But I take pride in being, the last two, and it's been, 15, 16 years since they had the last one in '84. And, my dream was always, I said, well, Gates, you'll win one playing, you'll win one coaching, and you'll win one managing. But as we all know, the last part didn't work out. But that was in my dreams, really. All right, '68. I think it was the Red Sox, Sunday afternoon, doubleheader. A man named Gates Brown was kind of influential. Tell me about it. Well, that was a long day. We started off, and I think that we got out in front, but by the 9th inning, they had caught up to us, and Mayo had used all the other pinch hitters. Now, 1968, I wasn't one of his favorites. I mean, he would rather use the devil than to use Gates for some reason or other. I don't know why. But we get to the 14th inning, bottom of the 14th. He didn't use Matthews, Comer. He didn't use everybody. I was the last one, really. Bottom of the 14th, 2 outs, nobody on. I pinched hit, and I got Lee staying in the hole 2-0, Joe. And I stepped out, and I said to myself, okay, Gates, be patient, get you a good pitch, and turn it loose. And lo and behold, he threw me a fastball that was tailing. I hit it good, but I didn't know if it was high enough. It was a line drive. And when I seen Hawk Harrison turn his back on it, I said to myself, well, Gates, this one is over. And I mean, I've never been so happy in all my life. A matter of fact, a photographer sent me a picture. I was running around second, and I was clapping, and I never really show emotion. But that time, I mean, it got the better of me, and as I was around the second, I says, Gates, you're the luckiest man in the world, and 50,000 people was going crazy. I'll never forget that. Second game? Well, the second game, he gave me one of my rare starts, and we was behind again going into the ninth. We was behind by 3 runs, and we kept pecking and pecking and pecking. And all of a sudden, we had tied the ball game. Kaline was on third, Stanley was on first. There was 1 out, and Sparky Lau was pitching, a left-hander. And I was walking up to the plate, looking back over my shoulder, and Mayo kept giving me the go-ahead sign. So, he threw me one of those deep sliders. I didn't hit it as good as I could have, but the infield was in. And when I seen George Scott go to his right and try to backhand it, I knew we was going to have a run either way. But the ball got through, it snuck through, and we won that game also 6-5. And again, 50,000 people went crazy, and I had goosebumps, believe it or not.
Vivid memories of Tiger Stadium when he played for the Texas Rangers.
Larry, while you didn't actually play in Tiger Stadium, I know you came in to our ballpark many times, 7 years worth, and it is a special place, and now it's coming down. I wonder what feelings you have about that. Was it good to you as a hitter?
It was a ballpark that I didn't always feel comfortable in. I always thought home plate was turned a little bit to right center there. It was like when I took my stance according to the plate and I looked up, the pitcher wasn't where he was supposed to be. He was a little bit over my left shoulder. So I didn't always feel real comfortable in that ballpark. I do remember one game there that I'd hit 3 grand slams in a week. I had a chance to hit another one. And Mill Wilcox was pitching, and I hit a line drive that hit off the left center field wall. That only like a foot or so going out. And I remember that one, and I remember a home run one night I hit there to right field. I think it was Morris was pitching, and I ran around the bases, and Sparky comes out to argue, and he got the home plate umpire to overrule the guy at first base and call it a foul ball, and I had to go back to the plate and hit again. It was a ballpark, like I said. When I went up to the plate, though, I always thought that home plate was a little cockeyed. That it was sort of set up for a left-handed hitter as opposed to a right-handed hitter, I thought.
Mark Fidrych still has the same love for Tiger Stadium that he had when he captured our town in that wild, wonderful, and wacky summer of 1976.
Mark, of all the people that I've seen in Tiger Stadium, nobody, and everybody will agree to this, nobody caused the stir that you did in 1976 when you won those 19 games and you lost 9 and just turned the ballpark crazy. You turned it upside down. So I know that you, of all people, have got to have some special feelings about Tiger Stadium.
Oh, I do. I'll never forget the day they signed me in '74, and then the day that I actually stood opening day in '76 and stood on the line with all the guys when they introduced you out, right? And then we got the run out, and you stood there. They announced the starting lineup, and then we stood there. And I said, wow, I finally made it to the big leagues. Who knows how long, and why? I have no idea. But you looked at it as staying there and looking at all the people. Biggest crowd you've ever been in front of. Minor leagues had, the hundreds and the thousands. But now you're looking at a full-packed stadium going, wow, this is it. And when they announced, like Mickey, Willie, Rusty Staub, John Hiller, it was like, wow. Tommy Verizza, Vern Rule, and Danny Myers, and it went on.
Well, you brought kind of an enthusiasm and originality to the ballpark. Jim Campbell, the general manager, said he never saw anything like it in his life, but, you talk to the baseball. Now, nobody ever talks to a baseball. I got to ask you, I've covered your whole career, and maybe I know the answer, but what did you say to the baseball?
I was talking to myself, basically going, okay, here we go. This guy, it's me and him, and you got to throw strikes, keep your concentration. You release points here, that, and it was just like, okay, calm down. You got to come at him hot. It was just like keeping yourself under control, under fire. I'm in war right now, right?
Yeah, but you did that verbally. Most guys do it mentally.
I talk to myself. How many times you drive down the street talking to yourself?
I don't want to admit it.
Okay. Well, see, I did it in open public, but I didn't know I was doing it in open public, let's put it that way, until, people started recognizing it. Before it was just, oh, you're doing, this and that. Then people started telling you, do you know you're doing it? Well, I don't really pay attention to that. I'm playing a baseball game. That didn't come into my aspect.
Will you come back? Do you plan to come back to see the old place one more time before they take it down?
Do I?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, please. Please. I mean, I'd definitely love to step out there one more time. Sometime at, midnight or whatever during the season, I'd like to break through security and steal the mound. You know what I'm saying? So when they wake up in the morning, they go, well, what happened? Seriously, are you kidding me? I still think of that today. Standing on Tiger Stadium, on the mound, looking at home plate. Are you kidding me, Joe? I'll never forget that. Rest of my life. And I'd like to be like Mickey Stanley did when they were hoorahing, tearing up center field and all that, the whole outfield, and they were putting all new grass down.
Mm-hmm.
And he hired a truck to come in, take all the grass up to his house because he was building a new house, and they started the whole front yard.
I didn't know that.
Wow. Oh, yeah, I talked to Mickey about that one. Said, hey, they were going to throw it away. They were going to throw it away. He says, wait a second now. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this is, I mean, are you kidding me? To get a piece of that place? Oh, yeah.
Dave Bergman of the 1984 champions was a ball player's ball player as well as a manager's ball player.
David, a lot of stuff has happened in Tiger Stadium, but in my time, one of the most incredible things I ever saw was that home run you hit in 1984 against Toronto when you fouled off, I think it was 17 million pitches. Now, you got to tell me about that moment. It was very special.
Well, Joe, as time goes on, the story gets better and better. It was a classic moment for me. As you well know, one of my things that I always took a lot of pride in is just helping the ball club. Because of the talent level that I had, I knew that I wasn't going to be a superstar, and I was just somebody that kind of plugged in the little cracks that were there every now and then. So when I was able to help the ball club, that particular at bat, it just made me feel really wonderful. But anyways, I believe it was the 10th inning, and the score was tied 3-3, and Roy Lee Jackson was pitching. And Roy and I go back a long ways because we were teammates in winter baseball. So I knew the type of competitor that he was, and of course he knew the type of competitor that I was. And neither one of us were going to give in that situation. So I really didn't think that there was going to be a walk involved in that at bat. And he just kept challenging me, and I kept swinging hard, closing my eyes. I found over my career, the more times I closed my eyes, the better I was. But I just kept fouling off all these pitches, and then...
How many?
Well, it was a total of 13 pitches.
13 pitches?
I think it was 7 in a row after the count was 3-2. And again, because I've heard the story so many times, it gets better over time. In fact, some of these fish that you see on my wall, they've grown twice as big as what they really, really were. But anyway, it was just a classic at bat, and then he threw me a slider down and in. And actually, it was a pretty nasty pitch that he threw, and I hit it out of the ballpark. And to this day, my mom is still disappointed at me because I didn't do cartwheels or jump up and down and put my hands in the air like some of the players do. But that just wasn't my personality. I was kind of a boring player that just went out and did my job.
David, you are an introspective guy. I knew you as a thinking ball player. What are you going to miss about this ballpark?
It's a very, very cool subject to talk about because the things that I'm going to miss are the conversations with Frank Fennick on the field about how is first base, is it the way you guys like it, the grounds crew and making sure that everything is done the way the players would like for it to be done, that real family atmosphere. I'm going to miss the locker room, the smallness of the locker room, because there's so much fun that takes place in the locker room. And because the locker room was small in Tiger Stadium, you could yell from one side of the locker room to the other side of the locker room to a teammate, and he could hear you. And some of the comments that I make now about some of the newer ballparks is that the locker rooms are so big, it's almost a long-distance phone call on the other side of the locker room. So you're going to lose that closeness. I'm going to miss the old urinal down in the runway. that was basically a trough on the side of the wall where you'd go to the restroom. Everything now is so customized and so nice. But to me, playing baseball is getting dirty, tearing up your uniform, maybe having some spit on your face and sweat and eye black dripping all over the place. And Tiger Stadium represented that type of baseball.
Max Lapides is a true fan, a man who has loved his team and his ballpark for his entire life. Max, after 65 years in this ballpark, and I don't know anybody else, no fan, anybody, who spent that much time in a ballpark, if I say to you 2 words, Tiger Stadium, what do you say?
The only place to start is with my father. My father was old enough to remember the start of the American League in 1900. And between the two of us, I probably spent more time in a ballpark with my father than most kids spend with their fathers in a lifetime. My father was a consummate fan. When I was a kid, we went to every single weekend ball game. When they put lights in and I could go at night and I was a young adult, the two of us used to see together maybe 50 to 60 ball games a year. And we talked. And my whole life, which was based on things that my father taught me and related to me, a great deal of that was interwoven with our discussions of what was happening on the field. And that's it. The ballpark really means my father.
Well, you go back to Navin Field, right?
I go back to Navin Field before the stadium was reconstructed. I think it was 1937 or 1938, with the wall in left field, which went on to Cherry Street. And I remember the Sunday doubleheaders with the overflow crowds standing roped off in the outfield, and the gentlemen stood in the hot sun out there with shirts and ties and straw hats on. Growing up in Detroit as a Jewish kid, you have to remember we had our Hank Greenberg in those days. And unless you experienced what he meant to us as kids and what he meant to the community, it may be a little bit hard to understand. It was a depression. A lot of people were struggling to make a living. It was a time that the war was brewing in Europe with the Nazis and anti-Semitism, and Greenberg became the central part of anybody who loved sports and loved baseball in this town. And we all grew up with that, and that was a major thing. Going to the ballpark and seeing Hank Greenberg was something that all the kids, we used to ride the streetcars down, we would take the buses down, we would usher, we would do lots of things to get into that ballpark, which of course was Navin Field, and then it got transformed into Briggs Stadium. But those are the memories that come back from the 30s, and they are extremely vivid in my mind. Baseball was a central part of life in the whole city of Detroit, and of course the stadium was the focal point of that.
Sonny Elliot, the wondrous weatherman, has followed the Tigers since the 1930s.
You followed the Tigers for more than 60 years, and I know you go way back because you were born in the city of Detroit, and you still come to the games. You're up there all the time. You sit in the front row. I'm heckling you, and you watch with such interest. Give me some feeling you have for this ballpark that we're no longer going to have.
Baseball in and of itself is, to me, a great game. It's chess, it's checkers, it's the mind game that's played. It's a great game. And to sit at Tiger Stadium now and look at it, it's like the memory is always there. I first went to Tiger Stadium when it was called Navin Field, and out in the right field they had no seats out there, just a giant green wall. And when I was a child, one of the things we used to do is skip school on a Friday or go down early on an early Saturday morning, and the Tigers were playing, and we'd go to the Cherry Street entrance, and the usher there, the chief usher, would look and see who were the gang of kids that were out there they could use for ushers. You had to bring your own rag, and you would pick somebody, and we'd go in, and we'd be assigned a section, and we would be ushers for that day, at least for the first 2 innings. A couple of mornings we would go out there early enough. Hank Greenberg would pick some of the bigger kids to run out in left field, and he'd hit some fungos out there to them. It's marvelous, just marvelous. And the whole the whole stadium, to me, is just one great, big, pleasant memory. And my mother loved baseball, and she didn't know a first base from she didn't know anything about baseball except that Hank Greenberg was the first baseman. And I would say, yes, he singled twice today and hit a triple. My mother would say, did he hit a home run? And that's all she was interested in. And once when Ty Tyson was broadcasting the game, he said the pitcher, I forgot who it was, one of the pitchers, either Tommy Bridges or Schoolboy Rowe, bent down, picked up the rosin bag. And my mother heard him say he picked up the rosin bag. She said, rosin bag, is there another Jewish fellow on the team?
As a player and broadcaster, George Kell left a mark on Tiger Stadium that'll never be forgotten.
George, you know something? I don't know of anybody who spent more time in Tiger Stadium than you did. You were a player for 7 years. You broadcast for 38 years. That's 45, George. And, you know, the record before that was Harry Heilman. He played 17 years. He broadcast for 17. That's 34. But you did 45. It's amazing.
It's amazing. And the time went by so fast. And you know something? That if I had not have broken down like an old man's supposed to break down, and first I had a knee replacement, then a back operation, I might have still been broadcasting today.
What did that place mean to you, George? You know, we all have a feeling about it, but I know your feeling has to be very, very sensitive because you were so close to it in so many ways. First as the player, as I said, then as the broadcaster. Tiger Stadium, I'll just say that to you, Tiger Stadium.
Well, I'll tell you, it means so much to me. The day that I was traded, Mr. Mack called me up to his suite. Now, I've read several different versions, but I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened. He called me up to his suite in the Book Cadillac Hotel, and he said, George, I've traded you to Detroit. And I was shocked. I thought when you were traded to somebody that you were rejected. Nobody wanted you. They wanted to get rid of you. But he went on to say, you are going to be a good ball player, and you're going to make a lot of money, and Detroit can pay you, and I cannot pay you. And I went out, and he says, you going out to Tiger Stadium, and you go up and see Mr. Troutman.
George Troutman, yeah.
See Mr. Troutman. And I went in to see Mr. Troutman, and he said, how much money are you making? And I said, Mr. Troutman, I'm making $6,500. But I didn't think that was enough money because I've been in the big leagues 2 years, and I've played every game, and I've played good for Mr. Mack, and we've discussed it, and he said I was worth more money, but he said, if you have a good year this year, I'll give you the $2,000 at the end of the year. And he said, George, you've already had a good year, or the Detroit Tigers would not want you, and I'm going to give you the $2,000 right now. So he signed me to an $8,500 contract, and at the end of the season, he said, you did what you told Mr. Mack you was going to do. You had a good year, so I'm giving you $2,500 more. Now, that's what Detroit meant to me. I thought I'd found gold in the streets somewhere. Hank Greenberg was the one that took me under his wing, and I never will forget, toward the end of the season, and I was having a good year, I'd hit 300 everywhere I'd been, but I came to the major leagues from a Class B league, where I hit 396 at Lancaster, and Mr. Mack bought my contract. And so coming from a Class B to the majors, I wasn't quite ready to play big league ball. But I knew I could hit. And I was hitting over 320 in Detroit for the time I was there. And for the season, I was hitting over 320. And one day I went 0 for 5, and they booed me. And when we came in, Hank Greenberg came over and sat down by my locker, and he said, George, you want me to tell you something? He started laughing. He said, you've got it made. I said, what do you mean made? He said, they don't boo you till you are successful. He said, they booed me throughout my career after I became successful till the day I left here. And he said, they're going to boo you now when you don't go good because they expect you to hit 300 every year and make the All-Star team.
What was it like, George, playing in that ballpark at that time after the war? What made Tiger Stadium special?
Right after the war, I think they reached 1 million people for the first time in several years. But in 1950, when we had the best club we ever had while I was in Detroit, we had 7 guys that hit 300. We had Evers and Wirtz and Groth and Pretty had played second base, and Lippon hit 290-something. and Callaway right at 300, and myself. And we drew 1,950,000 people, which was the record for a number of years before they ever went over 2 million people. It was a thing to do in Detroit, to come to the Tiger ball game. If you were a member of the Detroit Tiger Baseball Club, you were almost like a god in Detroit. People, I couldn't believe, a country boy like me and just a kid, that they treated me like they did.
John Hiller fought back from a heart attack to become one of the finest relief pitchers in the history of the Tigers.
John, you got to tell me one thing. You got to tell me what life was like down in that bullpen.
Well, Joe, as you know, you've been by it, you've probably stuck your nose in it. It's a pretty depressing place, so we had to sort of invent things to make it a little exciting. It was even hard to really watch a ball game. We were below ground level and looking through that steel-gated fence, and so we invented things. There was times there I guess we go through different formats. For a few years, we would 2 or 3 of us would bring down scopes, and pretty high-powered scopes, so we could scope out the vendors. Mickey Lolich, when they come out with those little wee 2-inch TVs, we'd bring that down there and watch whatever. Rarely a baseball game, but something on. Before I was married, we used to have a portable plate that we would take out and in and out, that the catcher would. So it was white. So we would try and find somebody out there in the left field stands, a couple good-looking women, get our marker right on there, meet us at Lindell's, and show the sign up, and then turn around and show them our name. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
How about sneaking food down there, John?
Well, we didn't have to sneak. We had our share of hot dogs. We were fortunate. We had some great fans, and matter of fact, to this day, I still pick out, there's 2 gals that still have those seats every once in a while, and they'd go buy us a hot dog if we wanted to. And when years ago it wasn't heated. I think they have heat in that now, and we'd have to try in the fall and in the spring bring down a pot of coffee. We played a silly game where there was a little rounded concrete edge on where the fence was attached, and we'd see how many times in a row we could bounce it off that fence and catch it. It was jagged, so it would break down every once in a while. Yeah, we played gin down here in the bullpen. And when Mayo Smith was there, we had a direct line. Not a direct line, but a telephone line. So if we had friends around the country, we found that we could call long distance and didn't cost us anything.
Mickey Stanley made history in the 1968 World Series by moving from center field to shortstop.
You know, Mick, I've always felt that the easiest thing in sports, I can't think of anything any easier than going from center field to play shortstop in a World Series without ever having played shortstop. I think that was a very, very simple thing to do, and it didn't require any special talent or anything. So tell me about it. What happened there in 1968 World Series?
I know you're being facetious. Actually, I had no inclination it was going to happen until about 8 days before the regular season was over, and Mayo Smith called me up to his room in Baltimore, and I didn't know what that was for. That's never happened before, and he brought me in the room, and he says, I want you to play shortstop in the series. And that's how I found out. My reaction was, I knew he was serious. He called me up to the room. My first reaction is, what are the other players going to feel if I don't do a good job and if I blow the series for him?
Right.
My concern was how the other guys were going to take it. So, and he said, I know you can do it. And the reason, Joe, is every day I go to the ballpark, take ground balls at shortstop with Ray Euler because I love taking ground balls. And I try to get some pitcher to go over to first base and take throws because I just always loved doing that, and that was my way of releasing a lot of nervous tension before the ball game. And he saw that every day, and I think Cash had a lot to do with it, because Cash a couple times says, you could play there, you could play there. My biggest concern was whether or not I'd make the right fundamental moves, if I'd be in the right place at the right time on cutoffs and relays in the outfield. But because I had played center field so long, I saw all those plays develop in front of me for years, and thank goodness, I guess it's just maybe instinct, but I just, fortunately, I didn't have to think about it. I just went to the right place, and things worked out well. I was awfully nervous. I did not enjoy the World Series one bit. It was just horrendous amount of pressure.
Didn't the first batter hit a ground ball to you?
Yes, Lou Brock, in fact, I could tell by his little inside-out swing, he was trying to hit one to me, and he hit a sharp ground ball my way, and thank God I caught it. And as I was proceeding to throw to first base, I said, well, if you're going to throw it away, throw it hard. Don't lollipop it over there. And I about broke Norm's hand, and that really relieved a lot of pressure. I would not have wanted that to happen. My first ground ball in the 5th or 6th inning with the bases loaded might have been a different story.
Bob Talbert, the Free Press columnist, never hid his love for Tiger Stadium.
Robert, you know what I find interesting is that you came to Detroit from South Carolina, and you did something that none of us ever did. Well, we're up in the press box in the comfort and convenience of that nice walled-in, glassed-in press box. You did it two ways. You followed Tiger Stadium both as a journalist and as a fan sitting in the stands.
Joe, I was blessed to come to Detroit in 1968 when the Tigers won the World Series. The Free Press assigned me to be our man in the bleachers. But my first visit to Tiger Stadium, and I'm getting some goosebumps here thinking about it, because here I am, a crew-cut, barefoot boy from South Carolina who had never been in a Major League Baseball stadium. And Joe, I got tickets for a doubleheader on a July afternoon. I think it was White Sox. I walked into Tiger Stadium from the main entrance, and all of a sudden I was just like, I had never had a moment like that in Detroit since, and I had never had a moment in my life before like that, where all of a sudden everything I've ever wanted was true. It came true like Christmas. It was like the feeling after Thanksgiving meal. It was like everything. It was wonderful. I just felt like I am in heaven.
Well, what was it like sitting in the stands? I say, we're upstairs, you're downstairs, not as comfortable as us, but you, over the years, have written you would be no place else. You never came up the stairs in the press box.
My wife bought us season tickets when Sparky Anderson took over, it was 22 years ago, I guess. But I would always go sit in the stands anyway. At first, before we got season tickets, I liked to sit in every place I could in the ballpark. I thought that would be fun because they're all different. And there are. The fans in the upper deck bleachers in deep right and deep left are a breed apart. You can hardly see much. I mean, it's a different crowd. The bleacher crowd, of course, we all know what they are. They don't, but we know. and down the lines in different spots, way back behind home plate. And what I get by being in the stands, I get to hear a lot of misinformation. And I have to bite my tongue a lot. Because you hear these people saying these things, these outrageous lies have been told, or these fibs, or these things. And at first, I would hear them say these things, and I'd start correcting them. Then I realized there's no reason to correct these people, because there's no contest for this. But you got a real feeling about the fan and how some know, and then I love the kids, Joe. See, you don't get that in the press box. I don't think there's ever been a kid in the press box, has there? The kids, you get them two ways. You get them to sit behind you and kick your seat. That ain't fun. But you also get them who got their glove there. And they sit that game for 9 innings believing they're going to get a foul ball. But to hear these kids talk about baseball and talk about why they like these players and what they can do and what they dream and how they're going to play in their little leagues. And I'm going to do I've had more kids talk about how they're going to be Alan Trammell. So that's what sitting in the stands is about.
Earl Wilson was a pitching force when the Tigers were at their best in 1968.
Earl, you came to the Tigers in 1966 and played until 70, which meant you were part of that World Championship team. But tell me what it was like. What feelings did you have of playing in Tiger Stadium? Because you came from the other great ballpark, Fenway Park, and now you're in Detroit. What did Tiger Stadium mean to you?
Well, Tiger Stadium was the first stadium that I made a Major League start in. This big, huge building, all green seats, and it's funny, it makes it look like you can reach out and touch the walls. When I was with Boston, when I came to Detroit, this was the first place I ever been that black folks owned something. I had been raised in the South, and I came to Detroit. I would go down the streets and I'd just see these big, beautiful homes like on Boston Boulevard, something I've never seen before. And I said, wish I could play here, And just fortunate enough, I got traded here.
You came here with the Tigers, and you were the first player to ever have an agent, Bob Wolf, and I know that drove Jim Campbell, the general manager, a little crazy.
Well, it was the year that I won 22 ball games, and that winter I was talking to Bob, and he just felt that I should get more money than I thought I should get, and I said, well, I don't know how to go about it. So in turns, he said that he would come in and help me negotiate. I said, well, Jim Campbell is not going to see you as an agent, and I know that for a fact. You don't even want nobody in the room with you talking. He said, that's all right. So I was living downtown in an apartment, and he said, well, if you run into problems, call me back at the apartment. I go out and tell Campbell that, you know, I've had a tough night and I'm ill, but I want to talk about the contract. And every time we would go over some things and it get a little sticky or something, I have to excuse myself. I go outside where he couldn't see me, go down and pay phone it, and I would call Bob back at the apartment. And so we finally got it done, but after all these years, Bob Wolf writes a novel, and then he tells about that negotiation. Then I get a phone call. I knew damn well you wasn't that smart, Wilson.
A big moment in 1968 for you was?
We came back, and with a dedication, I'll never forget a guy, Norm Cash, you know, he, God rest his soul, he said that ain't no way in hell that we can't win it this year. And it just kind of kept going that way. And I'll never forget a guy named Eddie Matthews, the Hall of Famer. He was on that ball club, and somebody wrote on the wall going down the runway, let's win in spite of Mayo Smith. And Eddie Matthews said, I don't know who wrote that on that wall, but it better come down. To this day, I don't know who took it down, but it was down. But that's the kind of respect he commanded. And we had some guys, some great veterans on our team. Elroy Face, you had Eddie Matthews, you had Kaline, obviously, and Freehan was a leader. Cash was in his way, and you know, you didn't get it out of hand. And you know, it was a fun group of guys, man, that we did a little everything. And but you know, you was kind of out the group if he wasn't performing. You couldn't do what the other guys did, and that made it special.
Denny McLain, who made history with those 31 victories in 1968, speaks from the Westchester County Jail in Valhalla, New York, and shares some of his memories of Tiger Stadium.
But you know, you gave Mickey Mantle a wonderful moment, and you know, when that thing was happening, when you threw the home run pitch to him, I didn't know it. Here's the big star sports writer in the press box watching this thing, and I didn't know what was going on. Why don't you recapture it for me?
Well, as you may recall, Mantle was coming up for one of his last times in the major leagues, and we had a 6-1 lead in the top of the ninth. There were 2 outs, and I called Jimmy Price was the catcher. I called Price out to the mound. And I just told him, I said, listen, you and I will never get into the Hall of Fame together. I said, so why don't we do something to get ourselves in one way or the other? He said, what the hell are you talking about? I said, well, let's see if Mantle can hit a ball out. I said, he needs one more to join some kind of an all-time Yankee list or something. I said, let's do that. And he says, you got to be kidding, it's cheating. I said, oh, for God's sakes, he can't hit a 6-run homer. Come on, Price. So Price said, what do you want me to do? I said, well, when Mickey gets up, I said, when he comes to the box, you just tell him, be ready. He says, be ready? I said, yeah, be ready. So he went behind the plate. Mantle stepped into the box on the left side, of course. And Price says to him, hey, Mick, be ready. And Mantle looked down at him, and I saw Mantle's face. I mean, I didn't know if it was glee or if he was scared all of a sudden. And I threw the first pitch in about 60 miles an hour. In fact, the pitch had to be on an arc. And Mantle took it for strike one. Mantle looked out at me. He turned to Price, as Price recalled, and said, hey, listen, he's going to do it again. Mantle says, you sure he's going to do it again? He said, I'm sure as hell he's going to do it again. So I threw the next pitch, and Mantle took it again, strike 2. Now I'm worried. Now I know Mickey was no brain surgeon, but this was kind of silly to take 2 of these in a row. So then Price came out one more time and says, what do you want me to? I said, Jim, just tell him to be ready. Would you please just tell him to be ready? So Price went back behind home plate, told him to be ready again. The umpire, of course, as I recall, it was Ed Runge, but I may not have my best recollection there. And so the umpire knew what was going on. Everybody knew what was going on. And then we threw the next pitch. Mantle fouled it off into the base of the stand. And then Mantle put his hand out over the plate and said, hey, throw the damn thing right here, right out over the middle of the plate about belt high. And, of course, you know, I gave up 30, 40 home runs every year. One more didn't make any difference to me, and I was always able to find that sweet spot. So I threw the next one. He hit the ball in the right field seats. And as you may recall, he come around the third base with his hand up. He took his hat off and acknowledged it. And then, of course, the people brought him out back in the field. That was a terrific moment. Not to only be a part of it, but to see Mickey Mantle was my idol when I was growing up as a child. And to be able to participate in a moment like that, it meant a great deal to me.
Listen to Harmon Killebrew talk about becoming the first player to hit a ball over the left field roof in Tiger Stadium.
You got to tell me about what happened, how it came about, who was pitching, and the circumstances of it, because I had never, in all the years in the ballpark, seen anybody do that.
I have so many really fond memories about that ballpark. As far as that home run off Jim Bunning, of course, I'll never forget that one. And why it went over the roof, I'll never know. I hit the ball quite well, but I had no idea when I hit it that it was going to go that far. And
you know, you couldn't see it, but I could from the press box. It was an amazing sight because it bounced twice. We could see it bounce twice, Harmon, and gone into the darkness.
Yeah, it was not a windy day, as you recall, and it was a fastball by Bunning. Of course, I'll never forget that. And the ball was hit quite high, but I had never hit one like that before in any ballpark. And went very high and bounced over the back part of the stadium. The interesting thing to me was the next morning, I had 6 calls from people who said they had that baseball.
6 people?
Yes, and they said they wanted to trade me the ball for another ball. I couldn't figure out how they would get that baseball, but the next morning when I went to the stadium, one of the groundskeepers came up to me, the head groundskeeper, and I can't remember his name, and you would.
Neil Conway?
Yes, I think it was Neil, and he said went up on top of the roof, and it was stuck in the gutter on the back side of the roof up there, and here's the baseball if you want it, and he gave it to me.
If Ernie Harwell tells us there's a double into the left field corner of Tiger Stadium, we can all see it because he's been a part of our lives for so long.
Ernie, 39 years in this ballpark, 39 years in the broadcasting booth. And it's probably a dumb question to ask, but doesn't it get a little crowded in there after 39 years? What's it like?
It is a little bit crowded. We never had a real big booth at Tiger Stadium, but we're down so close. We really love that spot to work because it's the best in baseball. You can see them sweat and hear them cuss. You're so close, and I've been at games when late in the season there weren't many people in the stands, and maybe the visiting center fielder would come to me the next day and said, "I heard you broadcast the game. I was out there in center field, and your voice was carrying out there."
You know, my compliment to you, and I've said this in the paper many times, that you broadcast this game so long that when you say that there's a double to left field and the people know this ballpark so well all over Michigan that we all can envision what's going on, almost like we're watching television when you're broadcasting to us.
I think that's because you're on a lot and people get used to you like an old slipper. They know your style, and as you noted, they know what the ballpark looks like. They know exactly where Kaline Corner is. They've been there many times. They know where the flagpole is. They know where that left field corner is. They know where the Tiger dugout is, and it makes it easier for the broadcaster because of that.
Didn't you leave the ballpark one night thinking the game had been called off and Ray Lane or somebody had to get a hold of you? What happened? Do you remember that?
I remember it well. It was back in the late 70s, and it was raining before the game got underway, and Hal Middlesworth called down on the phone from the press box and said, "It looks like this game's going to be postponed, and if it is, we'll have a doubleheader Saturday, which is tomorrow night, but don't announce it until you hear it over the intercom." And then in about 30 minutes, we got this voice over the intercom that comes from the press box of the booth. It said, "Game called, doubleheader Saturday." So I put it on the air, and my wife Lula was at the game, and we got in the car and started out on the expressway and tuned in the scoreboard show with Ray Lane, and he's giving the scores, and all of a sudden he says, "Wait a minute, folks, that a report that Ernie gave out was erroneous. Ernie, wherever you are, come on back." So we came back, and they started the game, and the Tigers eventually won it. I think Tony Taylor hit a double in the 8th inning, but Jim Campbell was really peeved because a lot of people had heard the announcement on the radio in the ballpark, and they had left for Battle Creek or Saginaw, whatever. They demanded their money back.
Maybe there's certain things in your mind that really have stayed with you over these years, and I'd like to know what they are.
One of the craziest things that ever happened when George Kell and I were working together, we had a guy come from one of the outstate cities, and he had this big wheel of cheese. He was the mayor of the city, and he was going to present it to George and me. And in those days, we worked in that little booth back a third that had a slant roof, and you could only get in by coming down through the hatch like you would come into a submarine. And this guy had a little bit too much to drink that day, and he got up on that slanted roof, and he dropped the wheel of cheese. It weighed about 50 or 100 pounds, I don't know how much, and it rolled down, and in the box seats below, there was a little kid about 8 years old, and it almost hit him. It would have killed him if it hit it, but it hit a seat, and cheese splattered all over everybody. And the guy, I don't think he ever made it into the booth.
Charlie Maxwell was known for his Sunday punch, a man who picked the special day to knock the ball to the seats in Tiger Stadium.
Charlie, if I said to you, one date, May 2nd, 1959, what would you say to me?
Well, that was when we had to change the managers in Detroit. And we had I think it was like, 2-15 or 2-17. We had wasn't doing very well. And that's when they fired Bill Norman and brought in Jimmy Dykes. And then that's the day I finally got in the lineup to play full-time and hit the 4 consecutive home runs. I hit one my last time up in the first game. Then I hit 3 in a row in the second game against New York. So there's consecutive times at bat.
You know, a lot was made of the fact that you hit a lot of home runs on Sunday.
Right.
What was that all about? Was there any psychological involvement there that you did hit so many on a Sunday?
Actually, I think Dan Patrick, you know how great he was. He started all that, and happened to be that's where I really got to start, because I'd hit a couple before that, but then when I hit the 4 on that Sunday, then they boomeranged, and it happened to be, I think the next week I come back and hit another one, and it just seemed like it, started going like that, and I don't know why.
If anyone knew Tiger Stadium inside and out, it was Ralph Snyder, the longtime manager of the old ballpark. Ralph, you ran this ballpark for 22 years. You were the man in charge of everything in Tiger Stadium. Give me a couple of memories.
The World Series in '84 was memorable because of not only because we won it, but because of things that happened after the stadium. But George Bush was there as the vice president on Sunday when we won it. And the Secret Service were there in force and had set up a shortwave radio station, and there were snipers in the light towers. It was a very exciting time for people running the stadium. And Peter Uberoth, even the commissioner at the time, had his limousine roughed up when he left the stadium at the end of the game. And a little side note of the '84 series, you remember the press couldn't get out of the press box because of the trouble outside. And so Tom Monahan had a helicopter bring a load of pizza in for the press at second base. They landed on the grass behind second base. And at that time, I was having a party in my office.
Was there ever a more elegant player in Tiger Stadium than Hall of Famer Al Kaline? Albert, 22 years on that ball club, most of them in right field. What's your feeling about that place? Because that was your home, it was my home, but mostly it was a place where you grew up, where you learned to play baseball, where you learned to excel and achieve the greatest, the World Series. What does that place mean to you?
Well, first of all, I'm going to miss it quite a bit because, as you just said, that I've spent every summer there since 1953, and that's an awful long time. The very first time I saw Briggs Stadium at that time, now Tiger Stadium, of course, it was after a road trip where we got off the train. It was about 2 in the morning. We came from St. Louis, and we were going down Michigan Avenue, and I was sitting next to Johnny Pesky, who was pretty much a mentor to me and was pretty much trying to tell me and show me the ropes. He says, Al, he says, look out the window. Now it's 2 o'clock in the morning. He says, there's going to be your home for the next couple years. And it looked like a big battleship. He says, the old gray battleship. And if you really do look at the side of it, it does look like a battleship or a aircraft carrier. And next day, of course, I was staying down at the Tuller Hotel, and I walked to the ballpark and had a hard time getting in the stadium because here I was an 18-year-old kid, and the guards didn't believe that I was a player. And finally got in, and I wanted to look at the field. So I got behind home plate and looked out through the screen, and I never seen such a more beautiful sight than all the green seats. The grass was so green, and I was just totally amazed that I'm going to be standing on that same field where Ty Cobb and Gehringer and Greenberg and I mean so many great players were able to play, Babe Ruth and all those great names that I grew up reading about, idolizing, and I mean it was just you couldn't believe the thoughts that went through my head as a kid.
What was it like playing right field? It was the sun field, you had the overhang, you had the right field corner. What was it like out there all those years?
Well, you're right. It is a sun field, as most right fields are, and it seemed like Tiger Stadium is one of the toughest ones as far as sun is concerned. I think Fenway Park might be a little bit tougher as far as the sun. But the one thing about playing at Tiger Stadium is the fact that you're pretty close to the hitter. So your first step has to be the most important one, because a line drive, if you hesitate, the ball can get by you. You know, and then all of a sudden, then you have to make a decision about the fence. How far do you go back? And of course, I played before they had padded fences, and it was concrete, and you know, it could hurt. It could hurt a little bit. But I think that's the main thing. The sun is very difficult. The first step, line drive in the hole in the gap. I mean, you have to get a good jump on the ball because it'll be by you in a hurry. The stands, so of course the stands aren't as bad as they were when I first joined the ball club. In fact, it's the reason why they call it Kaline's Corner now, is because they had to take out so many box seats because I was running over there and in foul territory where the bullpen is, and falling into the seats all the time because I couldn't see where the fence was because they were so low. And but right field is a place where you have to make up your mind in a hurry. Particularly in Tiger Stadium, and you have to make up your decision very quickly.
Finally, 2 quick memories. I'll never forget the night in '68 when you won. Downward single to right, you scored the winning run, and the place went crazy. Number 1 memory. Go ahead.
I remember that because I wasn't playing much right then because I had been injured, but I told my wife that I was going to do something special that day, and I got on base and I think I worked a walk and was able to score the winning run for the Tigers. Donnie Work got, of course, the big hit, and I just had a feeling that I wanted to do something special that day to win help the Tigers win in '68. And my other great memory of Tiger Stadium was the All-Star game that we had, a great All-Star game that we had, American League winning, and the home run that Reggie Jackson hit up in the light towers. I mean, it was a tremendous blow. The situation in the game where he had 2 strikes, 3 balls, and still was able to generate that much power. They hit it up there in the generators.
Steve Boros, the kid from Flint, has never lost his feeling for Tiger Stadium. Steve, I know you played your first game at Tiger Stadium in 1957, but I'm sure you saw it as a boy also, having lived in Flint. What feelings do you have about this old place?
Well, I hate to see it leave the city of Detroit. It's still in my memory, always will be, because for our family, one day we look forward to every summer. My dad had a grocery store. He only closed down on Sundays. It was one Sunday during the summer, we as a family would get in the car and drive to Detroit for a ball game. And I still remember the first time I walked through that runway and saw those beautiful green seats, that beautiful enclosed stadium, the beautiful green grass, and those Tiger players in their white uniforms. I'll never forget that. It was one of the most thrilling things I can recall as a kid, and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the ballpark.
And to play there.
and to play there. Who would have thought that? And of course, it was a thrill for my family to be there. We were always Tiger fans, and for me to be a part of that was just incomprehensible for me, and for my family, it was quite a thrill as well.
Was there a special moment for you at the corner?
I remember so many of the Tiger broadcasts. I remember Harry Heilman saying, it's trouble, and you waited for him to say double trouble, because that meant it was over the fence. And of course, in my imagination, seeing all those games in my mind as he described it, and Ty Tyson, of course, Ernie Harwell, and then go there in person and not just be a fan, but be on the field to be a part of it, it's something I'll never forget.
Fred Smith is the #1 historian of baseball in Detroit.
You know, Fred, you're one of the few people that I know that saw baseball in Navin Field, Briggs Stadium, and Tiger Stadium. I know you go way back before me, but what was it like in the beginning there, way back in Navin Field in the 20s?
Well, of course, the ballpark was different. Past first base was just one level, and past third base. In fact, when Philadelphia used to come to town, I used to sit in the left field pavilion, and as soon as Al Simmons came to the plate, we'd run over towards the wall so we could see where his ball landed in what was then Cherry Street. It didn't always land there, but it seemed like it. And if he didn't, Jimmy Fox did, or Bing Miller following him. They were great.
Do you remember the first game you ever saw in Tiger?
Well.
Listen to me, Tiger Stadium, Navin Field.
Very well. We lost 15-10 to St. Louis, and there were no home runs. That made me very unhappy. And then when we walked out, got into our car to go home, people were all lined up on Cherry Street, wanting to know who won the ball game, what was the score, because they didn't start broadcasting till the next week.
You saw Ty Cobb. Give me your recollection of what it was like to see him. You knew he was a great player. You knew what he could do. You knew he was a dashing, flashing, just a wild kind of player. What do you remember about him, Fred?
Well, I remember very well that he scored from second on an infield out. I believe it was the last game he ever played. He was with Philadelphia then. He was either in 27 or 28. Those were the 2 years he played for Philadelphia. And after the game, there were a whole gang of us kids, and I got in to be first to have his arm around me. And he told me to study hard in school, be a good kid, and this and that, and signed the ball. Unfortunately, I don't have it anymore, but when I ever hear a criticism of Ty Cobb, I get mad, because most of the people didn't ever see him play or weren't even born when he was playing. See, he's been out of baseball since 28, and that's 70 years. And they didn't know him. But he certainly was nice to one little kid that day. And he lived on the corner of Burlingame and 2nd. And I lived 3 blocks away. And I used to go over and look at that house all the time. I never saw him, but just look, in great admiration.
Well, here's the man who played shortstop for the Tigers in the 1930s and later became a councilman in the city of Detroit for 40 years, Billy Rogell.
Billy, you're one of the few people that I know who played against and knew Babe Ruth way back there when you played shortstop for the Tigers in 34 and 35, as I said. It must have been just a tremendous experience to be close to that man.
Well, at that particular time, our clubhouse was right across from each other. And the visiting club had to go through our dugout to go to first base. Now, that's been changed since the rehabilitated Tiger Stadium. And Babe Ruth, for some reason or other, used to come there early every time we played the Yankees. And he used to sit in our dugout and talk. And listen, I never met a nicer man in my life than Babe Ruth. He's the only guy that people used to get up and scream, "There's the Babe." And I'll tell you today, 1,000 years from now, they'll be still saying the same thing.
Billy, what was it like in the mid-30s? Charlie Gehringer once told me, and it was very hard for me to believe, that at that time, even though you were in the midst of depression, that the people would come to the ballpark dressed as if they were going to the opera. I believed him, but do you remember it being that way, that the dress of the ladies and the men?
Don't forget now, listen, this is going back, for God's sake, it was 75 years ago. 70 years ago. And tell you, people were dressed up more then than they do now. I wonder, listen, they got hair down to their buttocks. don't shave. They look like a bunch of bums out there in that ballpark.
All right. You were not a big home run hitter, but I know you cracked a couple. Can you recall one for me that you kind of enjoyed, maybe one you sent over the left field fence that meant something to you?
Well, I'll tell you, Gomez was pitching one day, of course, for the Yankees, and I hit a ball over in Cherry Street, and the truck was going by. The ball landed in the truck. I said to myself, hell, these guys might hit home runs, but mine went the furthest. They haven't found the ball yet.
Alan Trammell has never lost his boyish enthusiasm. Just listen.
What's your feeling about Tiger Stadium? Because that was your home.
Well, it certainly was, Joe, and I'm proud to say that I played my entire career there, and somebody that really kind of, to me, when people say he was kind of an old-fashioned kind of player, I take that as a compliment because that's really the way I wanted to be known. I followed baseball, and when I was a kid, you know, I know history. I can go back years and tell you about certain players, and I've just followed it, and I still do. I love it, as you can tell. So for me to play at a stadium, I grew up on the West Coast. San Diego Stadium was round, symmetrical, and then you come to a stadium like Detroit, it's totally different. I remember the first time when Lou and I were called up, and we came from the airport, and it was a day game, and we came around the corner, and we saw, well, I hadn't seen it yet. The cab driver said, "There's Tiger Stadium," and I was looking, I was thinking, where? It looked like an old warehouse. And as you got closer, you could see the lights, and you could say, oh my gosh, you know, that is a stadium. And it was old, and had a little dirt on the outside there. And sooner, in the next couple of years, they did a little facelift on the outside and kind of redid it a little bit. But still, that was my first impression. But then the next impression, as far as going in and looking at a double-deck stadium, which is, there's no stadium like it. I mean, completely enclosed double-deck all the way around, and then just watching balls go in the upper deck. And when I first started, the green seats were still there, the wood, and I'd watch a ball go up in the stands, and it would break a seat. You'd see some splinters flying, and the manual scoreboard, and just things like that. That to me, I'd watched on TV, but certainly you got a different perspective when you actually step inside there.
October 13th, 1984, a Saturday afternoon.
Well, just another day at the ballpark, Joe. No, I think you're referring to Game 4 of the World Series that year, which I happened to hit two-run homers. And I think for me, as far as the significance is that we won, but the home runs meant something. We won 4-2, and again, the two-run homers supplied all the runs. And I remember the first inning, Lou led off with a base hit, which he had done the whole series and the whole season basically. And I got 2-0 on Eric Shaw and hit a home run. And then lo and behold, the third inning comes about. Same thing happens. Lou leads off with a base hit. Shaw falls behind me 2-0, and this time he threw me a little spinner slider, and my eyes lit up and swung the bat well. And boom, there it was, a home run. And we ended up scoring, and that was it. 4 runs. Jack Morse pitched a complete game, and you know, we had a 3-1 lead, and we felt pretty good going into the next game. And we all know what happened in Game 5 when Kirk hits the 2 home runs. But you know, Game 4 brings a smile to my face each and every time that we talk about it.
Bill Freehan grew up in Detroit and became the catcher who handled some of the greatest pitchers in the history of the Tigers.
I know you were born in Detroit, but you know what interested me over the years? How did you get to the ballpark? How did you get down there to see the Tigers play?
I grew up around 12 Mile Road in Woodward. We either hitchhike down Woodward Avenue or take a bus or whatever method we could do and go down Woodward Avenue and then walk out Michigan Avenue. And at that time was sort of an experience for a young kid. But sit in the bleachers and follow the Tigers and maybe dream a little bit that maybe someday you might be able to do that. You know what? I never thought about what position I was going to play. You know, you're thinking just being a player, and you know, no one was a catcher on the sandlots at that time. The fence was a catcher, so you were thinking of, you know, being a player and hitting. And you know, you'd come back and emulate a Harvey Keene or a Johnny Groth or a Vic Wirtz or some guys like that.
Bill, give me your perspective of the Lou Brock play in the 5th game of the '68 World Series, and Willie threw him out from left field. Really the play that turned the entire series around, and of course was supported by that great picture of Lou trying to touch home plate, and he doesn't get there because you've got him blocked off with your foot.
The most important ingredient was a perfect throw from Willie Horton. And maybe Lou Brock underestimating Willie's arm. I mean, then you get in position, and I can only get in position relative to where the ball's going to come. And he gave me a perfect throw. Obviously, you concentrate on catching it, and you know, a collision occurs. And it was interesting looking at the films. You know, neither of us fall down. And if you look at the films, Lou starts to come back, and I tag him again. And he and I are good friends, and we talk now. And he said, you know, if you thought you tagged me the first time, why'd you touch me the second time? And I said, hey, if you thought you touched home plate the first time, why'd you come back to touch it a second time?